Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today. It's a particular honor because Dr. Altintas's early work on the Kepler workflow system had a big impact on my understanding of what's possible with respect to reproducibility and scalability in computational research. So at first it was hard for me to come up with a topic, figuring out what I had unique to tell you, but then it became clear that I've learned a lot over the past few years as I built a data science support team here at the University of Arizona. So I wanted to take this chance to tell you why and how. And although I assume many of you will not end up in academia, much of what I've learned came from industry and I think it is used and applies to industry best practices. And yeah, bringing it into academia has helped make this a success. So just first, I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction, tell you about myself and about the challenge that we're facing, the problem we're trying to solve with our data science team. I could talk for a very long time about myself, but I'm going to try and make this brief. And I'll also note that a lot of times in the bottom, I put some references. Here I've put some books that I found very influential in my career, learning about biogeochemistry. A lot of my work is really focused on the changing Earth system, so the IPCC reports. And my postdoc advisor, Mike Dietz, and the whole approach to ecological forecasting, taking some of the principles from weather forecasting and applying it to ecological systems. That's my scientific background. And I do have a background in field work in lab and other types of standard types of science. When I was getting a PhD, this is me back in 2004, doing field work, collecting grasses and digging holes and figuring out how much carbon was in different places in the ecosystem and how that was changed by nitrogen. So there's a lot that happened. Eventually, 2016, a big event and was getting a huge grant to take on the responsibility of running the data and computing pipeline for this big machine that's out in Arizona. It's the largest agricultural robot, and it's also the largest public domain agricultural data set. And so it was my responsibility to get the data from Arizona to where I was in Illinois, process it, and make it available to researchers. And I thought this was going to be great, but eventually I realized what just a very hard problem that was. And as I was realizing what a very hard problem that was, I was offered an opportunity to move from where I was in Illinois to the University of Arizona to hand off responsibility for this pipeline to the folks here and then create my own team. I was effectively asked, what would you like to do? And started to come up with my own job description, but it wasn't really till I got here that I was able to figure it out. So I kind of got at a little bit of one problem that I was facing was that, fundamentally, that machine was collecting a petabyte of data over the course of a few years. It was collecting terabytes a day. And so that sounds great and all, but for a scientist who's used to walking through the field, observing plants, going from that to being able to make use of this data is just an enormous problem. It's analogous to the evolution in astronomy from, when Galileo was looking at stars and planets, and these are the observations that he made. He was able to figure out there's Jupiter and it has a few moons. I don't think he got all of them, but he got to understand over time how they moved around in the sky. And if you fast forward more recently, this is what we can see on Jupiter. We can see the fluid dynamics, We can make inference about the chemical dynamics, the evolution of the planet. And so going from the amount of information provided to Galileo and through his telescope and what we can look at now, it's a lot harder, but at the same time, there's a lot more opportunity to do really interesting scientific discovery. So this is where I focused. It was this problem. There's this enormous gulf between what's available in terms of computational resources, analysis methods, computing resources, analysis methods, lots of different types of data as well, can all be brought to bear on a lot of interesting and challenging problems. At the same time, what in my experience and what I think is definitely the case is that most researchers, most scientists use Excel to collect and organize their data, use spreadsheets and some type of spreadsheet to collect and organize their data. And then they use some manner of point and click analysis to do their analyses. These are great tools, but it does limit the amount of what types of analysis can be done, what types of data can be brought together. And so this is the big gap that I wanted to address. Okay, so that's a bit of background, and it gets me to the story that I'm going to tell you today, which is how and why I built a data science support team. And I definitely want to note that while I say I a lot, I definitely mean we. Very intentionally, I've engaged everybody in the group, as well as my mentors and collaborators, but especially the group, in defining what we're doing. This is a proposal that we wrote last year. It's kind of to give us our core funding. It's our 5-year vision, and everybody effectively got to say what they want to do, and get it approved. And so therefore everybody, I think by definition, is getting to do what we want to do. So one of the bits is just to have, we had some guidelines. I told you that I was, given pretty open scope of what to do, but our broad guidelines was to improve the data science capacity in ALVAC. ALVAC is a not so easy to say acronym for the Division of Agriculture, Life, and Veterinary Science and Cooperative Extension. I've gotten good and practiced at that. But that includes a College of Agriculture and Life Sciences with 10 schools and departments, or I guess 5 schools, 5 departments in cows, the Experiment Station, which has 11 locations across the state, cooperative extension agents throughout the state, and now more recently a School of Veterinary Medicine. So there is an enormous scope of work that we could potentially support here. And we're doing what we can as we grow to support larger numbers of people. But the important thing here is that we've got a relatively unique funding model. So the University of Arizona, like at least one and often more universities in each state, is a land grant university. I believe within UC, Berkeley, Davis, and Riverside are all land grant universities, but more typically, like Arizona, you'll have one. At some places in the South, there was, because of the legacy of segregation, there's often 2. So where I come from in North Carolina A&T is a historically Black land grant university, and then there's North Carolina State. Anyhow, these are supported by core funds appropriated by Congress through the Hatch Act of 1887. And the goal here was to enable agricultural research and to support the communication of agricultural research to the people. And so that's basically the core of our mission. There's a lot of different types of projects that the Hatch Act funds. And one thing I would like to see is it being used to fund more groups like ours. In addition to this funding, we're also funded by a number of different other mechanisms. So as when we engage with researchers on longer term projects, And we also apply for our own grants. So we're funded by approximately half by federal grants, competitive grants, and half through this Hatch funding. But having this core source of funding is essential for building a team and for recruiting people and being able to tell them that they can, have a career here, and appealing to people and telling them that it's, they're not coming here for a short term, but like a postdoc, but that they really have a chance to do something over a longer term. Anyhow, when I got here for my first 6 months or so, I read a lot of books and papers, trying to figure out exactly what I was going to do and how to do it. I began educating myself on some basic life skills, some management, and as well as the state of data science. So again, these references down below are things that have been very influential to me, and I think depending on what you may be looking for, could also be helpful. Let's see. So another key part of the work, in addition to kind of learning how to do this, was to start meeting with people to learn about the university itself. So I met with researchers across Alvesy. I spoke with them one-on-one. I presented to faculty, departments, and research groups, and wanted to learn, what's limiting them, like what's limiting them, and what ideas they had for what I could do, how I could help, what help they needed. So with this, I started to develop a mission and a vision and some of the processes that we use, and I started opening up some positions and started hiring. So some of the key messages that I got from this kind of talking tour, interviewing people on campus, well, first of all, that there's a need for foundational data and computing literacy. So most people who are using Excel to manage their data, it's effectively because they haven't been taught how to do it. And in a research environment, it's common and expected that, for example, if you're working in a lab, you'll come in and you'll learn lab protocols and procedures. And excuse me, the analogous work for scientific computing, I think, is nicely outlined in this paper called Best Practices for Scientific Computing. And the lead author, Greg Wilson, is also the founder of the Carpentries, the data and software Carpentries. Many of the people in my group, including myself, are Carpentries instructors. They've taught us a pedagogy for teaching this material. But that was one of the things that the university needed. At the same time, there was also a very clear message that people needed focused training for specific data and methods. So, what's taught by the Carpentries is a very general, almost the equivalent of how to read and write, like just basic principles of how to do scientific computing, how to use version control, how to test code, how to comment, etc. Just best practices. But then, so there's also this need. So people will be working with a specific instrument or with a particular type of model, and they need focused training for these methods. And in a lot of cases, we have to learn those. So we have the background, in statistics or other areas to understand it. So we figure it out, and then we'll teach it. And finally, there's also really a need for project support. So many people, they need a software engineer to set up a server. They need someone to help them, run their process, scale up their process from something that works on their computer to something that can process all of their data on a high performance computer. And so there's a bit of a learning curve there. And a lot of times they could use somebody to do work like that, but not full time. It's rare for a laboratory to be able to guarantee, to hire somebody full time and have the expectation that this is a permanent position. And even if they could, there's often not the need, because they may need a little bit of help with the HPC, for one project, and they may need help with the web application for another project, or statistics. And so there's this emerging idea of a research software engineer. So they've existed in academia for long before I got in, but this group of research software engineers has been trying to kind of define what this career is and standardize it across institutions so people recognize it as a viable career. And that's part of the type of service that we're trying to provide, is the opportunity for somebody to say, I need help with this, this grant. In some cases, when somebody is awarded a grant, while they're trying to hire somebody in my group can get started and lay the foundations for the type of data that they need or analyses that they want to do before, while they're hiring, or when people turn over. So we have a few guiding principles for our work that came out of my own philosophy and that of the people that I work with. So fundamentally, open and reproducible science is essential for modern research. And our goal is to enable research by facilitating the use of new data, methods, and tools. But one of the things that we wanted to distinguish ourselves was that we don't, even though the title is a data science support team, it's not always possible, but our goal to build capacity, so to not be a service organization or a service center like a microscopy center or an analysis lab where you send your samples and they do the work and they send you back the data. We want to have the opportunity to work directly with researchers and teach them, to bring them along. So it's not always easy. You can't teach Bayesian statistics in a few months to a new researcher, but you can teach them the basics of reproducible research. You can show them what they're doing and hand over code that they can reuse. And finally, one of the things that we've learned over time is that we can have the highest impact across the division across our domain of advocacy by focusing more on smaller projects. So projects that take up, about I'd say less than half, if not a quarter of somebody's time. So like 3 months per year, perhaps indefinitely or for a few years. But that's been preferable over some of the earlier projects that we were on that were more focused on infrastructure. So like that scanner that I showed in the beginning, it's like, okay, get this thing operational, move the data, analyze it, hand it over to people. That's a lot of work. That project had approximately 3 full-time software engineers working on it. And it just wasn't providing it wasn't meeting the mission of our group. So that's one of the reasons that we've evolved. Plus, it's just much more fun to have manageable size projects. I want to get a little bit more into open science, and because I really fundamentally believe that this is one of the great things that science has the opportunity to do and is increasingly doing. Furthermore, I think it's the responsibility of researchers supported by public funds to make their code and data available for reuse. The traditional scientific approach is to do a lot of stuff and then generate a paper, and you've got some nice figures and you can convey something and publish that paper. But the problem with that is that you have that figure, somebody reading it may have other questions that could be answered by that data. If that data isn't available or the code isn't available, it's hard to understand how that figure or how that result came to be. Plus, unlike a lot of lab methods, which can be very technical and challenging to convey. Well, computational methods can also be technical and challenging to convey, but they can also be encoded directly in a text file and transferred to somebody. So even if I don't understand it, I could rerun their analysis, or I could look at the little parts of it and figure out which equation was used, how does it match up with what they said in their paper, and et cetera. So this is a great example, a great opportunity, and increasingly it's becoming required by journals, funding agencies, and institutions. But the problem is that researchers aren't really familiar with what this means, and often it's unfamiliar, and it can be scary for them to hand over their code and their data, because that's a level of transparency that many people weren't trained with. I think this is one of those things that will take a generation to evolve, and the younger generation definitely gets it. And starting, with this expectation certainly helps. So a lot of what we do is we try to lead by example. We archive the products of what we do with, and get them DOIs, those are digital object identifiers, so that people can link a paper to the source data and code. And I also wanted to give you my opinionated, perspective that using licenses that are MIT or BSD compatible. These are open source licenses that provide the most opportunity for people to use, unlike, for example, GPL, which oftentimes a company won't touch. There can certainly be reasons for that, but when you're doing federally funded or publicly funded research, I think that this is the responsibility. And then using CCO or CC BY, copyrights are similarly permissive. CC BY means that you have to give credit. CC0 is effectively public domain. It has the least requirements, so the most freedom for the data. And then you rely on the scientific community and community standards to expect people to cite the source of the data, which doesn't always happen. But it still makes life easier for people if they don't have to worry about it if it's just in the public domain. So now I want to talk a little bit more about building the team. When I started building the team, I had to determine, who I wanted, what skills would be useful, what experiences and backgrounds, but also just what types of people, what personalities would be useful. So the most useful thing I can convey about this is that I've made a spreadsheet, and hopefully y'all can see this, but what it does is it tracks important skills to our group, and this shows a little bit of it, like core skills, so that we can identify, where we have strengths and where we have weaknesses, so that when we want to build a team, we know, where to focus. So for example, right now we're very highly, weighted toward people who know R and have backgrounds in life sciences domains. And so our next hire is going to be somebody who has who's more experienced with Python, machine learning, and has a physical science background, perhaps. And so this is kind of a list of the categories. These are all, the rankings are self-identified, so people go in when they're hired and they write out, what they think their level of proficiency is. And then we have a very high bar for experts. I was noticing that we have very few experts on any of this. So, to have, I guess we have 4 people with PhDs in the group, but only 1 who's an expert at scientific writing. Well, it's okay because we don't have to publish a lot, but I think that we do have experts. We just haven't really been willing to call ourselves that. Anyhow, but we can see where we're proficient and where we have weaknesses. And so this is has been a useful tool. But more than these specific skills, well, I don't really think that the specific skills they're necessary, but it's not the most important thing that we hire for. And a lot of this is what I've learned along the way. In the beginning, I had, a combination of software engineers and domain scientists, recent graduates, undergraduates, as well as much more senior developers. And one of the things that I realized early on was that I needed to hire people who liked to teach, who wanted to teach, not just because we need people to teach, but because those skills translate into good collaboration, good, people who can, who have the skills, but can also communicate them and help other people gain those skills. And the other thing that I've learned, and some of this just speaks to my management style, but I've found that hiring either senior software engineers or people who are PhDs has been the most successful. First of all, I mean, with the PhDs, there's a clear cohort of people like myself who are trained and with a traditional career path in mind of becoming tenure track faculty, but realized along the way that the most fun part of the job was the coding and the analysis, and we didn't, we weren't interested as much in a narrow, going into a narrow field of discovery direction, but in doing analyses and helping people and figuring out how to make the most of what's available to do analysis. So there's like this whole cohort of people, and those have been some of the most successful people in the group. What really hasn't worked has been hiring and mentoring junior developers. I think having people who are PhDs working when other people, faculty, work with them, there's just a level of respect as well as a level of experience that helps them work together and do things like get involved in the writing of papers, get involved in writing of grants, becoming co-PIs, principal investigators on grants, and just being much more actively engaged in the research. That said, there have been, there are some exceptions. There have been some really phenomenal junior developers, but as far as I guess one of my key points in the next slide about hiring, it's much harder if you to hire and get a lot of great contributions from junior developers or scientists. So that's why I put this slide, because I really wanted to say that one of the main lessons I've learned is that recruiting and hiring is mission critical. It's who's on the team and what they can do. It affects everything, and it's one of the most important things that anybody can do. And when I started, and what I see a lot of people doing, it's very ad hoc. There's maybe a lot of time spent on writing up a job ad, but when the people come in, there's not really formal methods. You kind of filter through some resumes and cover letters. You bring people in, you talk to them, you feel, you figure out like, does everybody like them or not? But doing something much more rigorous has been valuable. And furthermore, recognizing that false negatives are much better than false positives. Hiring somebody who isn't going to do the work, who's going to quit after a few months, just is a drain. It sets you back that many months and that much money. So it's much better to reject great candidates, unfortunately, than it is to erroneously hire not so great candidates. And also hiring great people, they attract more great people. I'm not saying I'm great, but definitely the people that I work with are. And so that has definitely been very helpful in building up this group. So again, there's some references below that have been very useful to me. I'm going to talk very briefly about management. I've learned a lot of this over the last few years, but what has worked for me has been really most importantly to focus on communication. So I'll talk a little bit later about all the different ways in which we facilitate communication, but also having clear objectives and then providing people with autonomy is also, it keeps people happy and engaged in doing what they want to do. So having a clear objective, like we need to, advance data science within our college, allows somebody to go out and meet a collaborator and build up a project, get on grants, and do, interesting things that they want to do. Or somebody can say, I want to learn, a new method or machine learning, and they can, seek out a project to work on that will help them, learn more about that. Another thing is that there's a lot of opportunities to use metrics, throughout the process of our work. So the number of tasks you get done, the number of quarterly objectives that you have that you successfully finish, etc. We do all of that, but we use them for communication and very clearly not for evaluation. So I don't evaluate people based on whether or not they ticked off a number of boxes, because that is counterproductive and it's easy to gain and it's not useful. It makes it less useful for actually understanding what people can and are and are not capable of. And it can also be demoralizing. So we take an agile approach. In particular, we use Scrum methodology. I'm not going to get too deep into management again to tell you much about that, but it is named, and I wanted to communicate that. And finally, just that coaching is better than firing. So there's a lot of value in having somebody, and if they're not performing in one area, identifying, talking with them, understanding what their strengths are, and helping them leverage those strengths can be a much better opportunity than firing. Although firing, I hate doing it. It's really hard, but sometimes has to be done. So again, I'm gonna, this is my last slide about management, but we do have, a system in place. And because we believe in openness, it's all available online. I can point you to, we've written down all of our procedures and with references, etc. But I think that this has been, part of our success is that we have an agile and iterative approach. It's also hierarchical. So I'll kind of walk you through from kind of the long range all the way to the daily processes that we adopt. So long range, we have our mission and vision. These are kind of our direction. This is where we're going. Is our vision. Also on the long range, we make sure that people are progressing in their career, developing professionally, and etc. But once we have this long range objective, then all these other processes at different timescales really service that. So it helps keep us on track. But also, our mission is not set in stone. It is constantly evolving. So it helps us to evolve it, figure out like, oh, well, maybe we want to go somewhere else. And we've definitely done that over time. That's part of being agile. So annually we have reviews. They're actually called career conversations. They're, I use what the university provides for this framework. It's a nice opportunity to say, what were your successes in the last year? What were and what are your goals for the next year? What do you want to learn? How do you want to develop? And again, it's not you're not measuring performance, but you're just opening up this conversation about, to understand where people want to go. We also have a retreat. We're about to go on it next week. 2 days, we go to a field station and just like talk about the group, where we are, where we're going, who's doing what. So again, this is, part of the emphasis on communication at all different levels. One of the last things I would want to do is have an annual review, and, have somebody be really upset or going the wrong way because we haven't spoken since the last annual review. So, so some of the more fine-grained stuff is helps, prevent that, helps us, check in regularly so we don't get too far off course. So earlier I showed you a book called Measure What Matters, and that describes all the philosophy behind objectives and key results. I think they're similar to key performance indicators, etc. But what this is an opportunity each quarter for everybody to say, okay, these are my, the quantitative outcomes that I want to see, that I expect to see over the next quarter. Some of them are shared group objectives, and some of them are individual, like the number of projects somebody wants to start or finish. Sometimes it's a number of blog posts they want to do. It can be something that they want to learn, number of workshops they want to give, etc. So this just says, each quarter, what do I want to do? And then each quarter we can go back and review, have we gotten there? And so quarterly reviews, it's we do a half day and we tell each other what we're doing. Monthly, we look at these OKRs and we say, okay, are these still priorities? So again, it's not to measure whether or not somebody's doing it right, but to say to reevaluate, okay, last month we had these priorities, this month, we have the same, is it the same or should we cut things off? Bi-weekly, this gets into the Agile Scrum methodology. We have this bi-weekly frequency of sprints. And sprints are, just like saying what you're going to get done over the next 2 weeks. And these, the tasks are basically on the, between an hour, it may take an hour, may not take even that long, may take a day or two, but it's saying, I'm going to get these few tasks done over the next 2 weeks. And again, this helps communication. It helps everybody know what each other are working on, provides opportunities for people to, help on each other's projects or work together. It really helps to facilitate collaboration and people understanding where each other are. It also helps when somebody is planning to do something and somebody else can say, oh, that looks really easy. I can do this, or I can show you a way to do that. It's much easier than it appears that you think it is. Each week I have one-on-one conversations with people. I think, again, keeping up the conversation, just checking in, finding out what they're doing. We also do a lot of paired programming, and we meet as a group to review each other's work or to do things like keep up our website, keep up our communications, review our projects more granularly. And finally, each day this 10-minute stand-up where we tell each other what we're doing, and more importantly, if anything's blocking our work. So we can say, I'm really stuck on this, and somebody else can help come up with a solution. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the group. And finally, I get to tell you what we actually do, which is really the fun stuff. Hopefully I can convey this. And we figured out how to do this over time. And I may have to show some, bring up our website to show you some of the projects that we've been working on more specifically. But I'm going to walk you through one more thing just to orient you to the types of activities that we engage in. We provide support, at a variety of different levels of engagement. So we have office hours every week. There's a time when people can stop by. It's been online since the pandemic, but it's just regular office hours, and we have some regular people and some people who show up. We also do workshops and presentations, which can be workshops are usually a couple hours, but sometimes there's a series of workshops. You go out, faculty presentations, present to a faculty meeting, or to research groups. And then we engage in short-term projects. So for example, one person says, I need you to move data from this database to another database. We've got $5,000. Do you have somebody that can, do that for us? It sounds like a lot of money now that I'm saying it, but it's a harder problem than it may seem at first. So anyhow, so we get these short-term projects where we accomplish very clear, we have clear statements of work. One of the most fun things we do is what we call the incubator. And I'll get a little bit more into that later, but these are where we can find projects and they're internally funded, so we can engage with researchers and start to know them, demonstrate our skills, learn about their problems, and do a few hours of work and get used to what they're get familiar with what they're working on. We support proposal writing. We have really put a lot of effort into helping people with data management plans, but we also get included either as co-PIs or senior personnel on proposals as they're being written. And finally, there's these big externally funded projects. We've been reducing those, like the scope of those, trying to stay away from the very enormous ones, but working on smaller ones. And that, yeah, as I said, that funds about half of our work. So this is our office hours. We used to hold office hours with a group of people, a local group called the Research Bazaar, which is like an ad hoc community of people interested in computational research. Sit around a table, have coffee, do some coding, talk to your neighbor. So that was a great way to have office hours. And then we, once we migrated online, we haven't gone back, but we have this online platform called GatherTown, and people show up and we have conversations. It's a little bit easier than Zoom because it's easy to pair off and discuss. So it's consistent. Most of us are always there. We also use Slack and email for that type of like short-term work. And then the workshops that we do, when we figure out that there's a particular need and it's more than just one person, we'll turn it into a workshop. Or if we come up with a new skill that we think other people would like to learn about, we'll provide a workshop. We make all the code that we do available online. We make the presentations, and we have a YouTube channel where we put our recordings up so that people can see. Is also, not only is it an opportunity for us to teach, but it's a key point for our outreach. So we get to know the people on campus and also let them know who we are. And I'm not really at heart a YouTuber, but I will say, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Okay, so again, the incubators are some of the most fun things we do. What this is with our core funding, so with this Hatch funding, approximately a third of our time that's funded by Hatch is spent on incubators, another third on workshops, maybe half and half, because there's also outreach and miscellany. Anyhow, so this is about a third of our time overall. It's 2 weeks. It's like, we offer 2 weeks of support over the course of 3 to 6 months, and people propose projects, and we choose them based on our ability to meet the needs of their, of their request. And although it's 2 weeks of people time working on the project, we actually budget for 4 weeks. So because of all the time it takes to shepherd a project in and all the time it takes, for follow-up. So a project may end, but then there's a paper published and, the analysis has to be redone. That's happened a few times. So it's so that gives us the reasonable buffer we need. If it was just 2 weeks and it was all working directly on what they, what the scope of that project, that wouldn't be insufficient. And it's really up to 2 weeks. So there's a, variety of scopes of work. But one of the key parts about this, as I alluded to earlier, is that this is the goal is to build data science capacity. So sometimes that means providing somebody with a new tool or teaching them a new skill. And a lot of times we use it as an opportunity just to teach the basic, the fundamentals of how to work with us using GitHub, writing code, and sharing data. So even if they don't understand all the details of analysis or a pipeline, it's still an opportunity for people to, kind of get up to speed with some of the foundational skills. And it's fun because, they have, these outcomes, and we produce dashboards, we produce, we'll help them publish data, do analyses, and et cetera. And, not only are these fun in and of themselves, but maybe about a quarter of them turn into longer term collaborations where either they have more funding to help us, so that we can continue on the project, or they invite us to help them write up a proposal. And they also, they turn into papers, data and code publications, et cetera. And we do a lot of outreach that I've been speaking of. This is something that I'm not I wasn't inherently great at, but I've come a little bit out of my shell and with the help of some of the people on my team. But we do other things. One fun thing that we do is we host a drone day. So this is something that our group puts on. Everybody who does research with drones gets together, tells each other what's going on, and then we went out to the football field and got to fly the drones. And that's just once a year. And that was led by the software engineer in my group who's really interested in processing drone data. And we also have a monthly, he also leads a monthly group, discussion group for people who are using drones. It's pretty open-ended. We have a Women in Data Science, an annual event that many of us have helped to organize and or present at. The Research Bazaar I mentioned earlier is both people get together around coffee, but it's also an annual conference that we contribute to, help organize and present. And we do a lot of newsletters. We have Twitter, YouTube, and our website that just takes effort. It's one of those things that I didn't expect, but it's one of you have to put it on the list of things to do. Writing up a blog post, it takes time, but it is also helpful. Finally, as I mentioned, we've had a variety of externally funded grants. These are really fun. Again, I'll emphasize that one of the things that we've learned is that it's much more valuable for us to work on, smaller scoped projects. We've been on a lot of projects with many different institutions, people from many different domains, each researcher trying to pursue their own work. And interdisciplinary research is definitely a big thing. It will help get grants, but it won't necessarily help you do them successfully. So that is a hard problem that I have not solved, is how to do successful interdisciplinary research. Just for example, I've been on a number where you have a computer scientist who is pushing the edge of their field in machine learning, and then you have a biologist who's figured out how to use drones to collect data or has all this cool data and they want to analyze it. But being able to analyze data in a new and useful way can be very different than pushing the edge of the field in machine learning. So in a lot of cases, an out-of-the-box tool is sufficient, and it doesn't take a faculty who's advanced in the field, but perhaps one of their graduate students or somebody who's can pick it up in a class to implement an existing method. So anyhow, so objectives aren't always aligned, et cetera. That's just to say, there's a lot of opportunity with large scale interdisciplinary projects, but we've found that we can be most effective with smaller projects. And finally, I'll just reemphasize that the key ingredients, I think, for our success have been, getting the right people, enabling, facilitating a lot of communication, a lot of feedback, and having a mission. So that's not data science specific, but it has helped us to develop a team that is specifically aimed at facilitating data science. And with that, thank you very much, and I'd be happy to continue the conversation, answer any questions.
Let's see.
Feel free to answer in the chat if your mic's not working. Oh, I see a chat. I see some in the chat. Okay, here we go. No specific questions, which is fine. That means I've answered them all. And you're quite welcome. Thanks for the opportunity to give the talk. Okay, so chat about our so how long are weekly sprint meetings? That's a good question. So there's kind of, if we were to take the formal Agile approach, I can't remember how many hours that takes. So these are actually bi-weekly. So we've, kind of compressed it all as much as we can. Into 2 meetings. One is a review and one is a planning meeting, and each of those takes about they take about an hour. Usually the review can be even quicker than that, and it depends on where we, if we have to discuss about any particular projects in more detail. But we try and constrain it to 2 hours a week. Do we have internships available? I will say that this is something that we have spoken about, and I would say reach out to me directly with your interests and a resume, and I'll see, because we definitely have more work than we can do, and we've talked about internships for a lot of reasons, and so yeah, so please reach out and let us know. We don't have a formal program, but it's something that with the right motivation we can set up. One thing I'll just say is, slightly as a technical matter, just so, since y'all are at a university, but that's not mine, but it's always much easier for us to hire somebody who's already an employee here, because we don't have to open up a job ad and fill it. So that's not quite the same as an internship, but I would say that, being able to, going up to somebody who's doing interesting work and asking them on your campus, if you're already an employee, that can, it's just much easier. I just tell somebody, here's a grant code, please put them on this grant for this amount of time, as opposed to, like, the months-long process of having an open position and hiring. But yeah, I think internships should be able to cut through that. Well, while I'm waiting for more questions, one of the things that I had thought about doing, but didn't get a chance to. Let me see if I can get this over here. Okay, is because I was telling you all about the incubator projects. Hopefully you can see my web page now. So this is our web page, but this is kind of a list of some of the projects that we've had. And so let me see. I don't know. So this one here, VolCalc, it's an R package. So this is one where, a scientist was had I think an undergraduate or graduate student going through an online database, pulling out information about different chemical compounds. So here's, so it's like, here's the name of a chemical compound. They'd open up a page and they'd figure out, how many types of groups are there, how many carbons, and how many carbon-oxygen bonds, et cetera, et cetera. Because there's this equation that can take all that information and say, this much of that compound will, volatilize at this temperature. And so coming up with this measurement of volatility. And so for each compound, I think that they had gone through about, 150 different compounds manually. And as soon as I saw the problem, I was like, I bet there's an API. I bet there's a way to get this and automate this process. And, in fact, there was. So this R package is a, relatively simple wrapper around another package that queries the data. And so we're able to automate that. We're able to take that original data set and use that to validate that what we were doing is correct, as well as to find errors in that data set and in our own. And so yeah, so that was a fun one, coming up with an R package. Coming up with dashboards, so using Shiny so people can visualize their data. I mean, this has really been transformative. Like this one right here, this soil moisture dynamics, it's like to look at this data at multiple different scales the first approach, the faculty member that we were working with had like 1,000 images. And so because they had created all these different, they had created all these different, different scales and different, sites, etc. But being able to like just flip through them at will and scale in and out became useful. So now we've got some more questions, so I'll answer these. So what do we use for project management? I don't think that I said this, but ZenHub is what we use, and so ZenHub is on top. Well, I'd say the core of what we use is GitHub, and this is like on top of GitHub. It provides us with a Scrum board. This might take a second to log in, but hold on just 1 second. I'll do it. But yeah, basically it fits on top of GitHub, and it allows us to manage those issues. Let's see, as soon as I do that and approve it, it's very secure. And you can see our board. Hopefully, it's pretty neat, and it does some statistics. And you can filter by sprint somewhere. Let's see, filter issues by sprint, so we can see what people are working on right now. And then we get reports about what we're, about like the processes that we're doing, how many issues are where. There's a number of different reports, etc. Let's see, velocity tracking is useful. How many, what do we have planned? Is it this much done 2 weeks if that's what we got done the last time? Usually we over predict. So anyhow, so that's what we use. Oh, good. I'm glad that it reinforces what you're teaching. So, yeah, and so since we've been using, I'll also point out, since we've been using ZenHub, GitHub has also gotten a lot more advanced at what it can do. So I think it can handle a lot of this now as well. So with GitHub, we also we manage these incubator projects there. Let's see, projects, incubator projects. So you can see, how we do this, our backlog, what's in the proposal, like each stage along the way, and then these each link to an issue, the proposal in the repository, etc. So we just haven't formally adopted this. That brings us to the end, I think, of the hour, but I'm happy to answer further questions. If you want to contact me via email or otherwise. So thank you all very much. Great to see you too. Thanks again for the invitation.